Greetings, mortals! It is I, Remortis, coming at you with a guide for Vrising. So now that everyone has gotten their hands on Vrising and got to dab a little bit, surely you realize that there are plenty of abilities to use and different combinations to use them in. So, I'm here today to help provide you with what I believe to be essential combinations of abilities so that you can conquer these vampire wastelands for yourself. And there will be timestamps below to skip to whatever is relevant to you. So with all that out of the way, let's just get right into it, shall we? So the first build we'll be going over with is what I call the Berserker. It focuses on using Power Surge, which will buff yourself or an ally that you hover your cursor over with, increasing your movement speed and attack speed by 20% each, and also inflicting Ignite on your attacks. And Ignite will cause a dot over 5 seconds and will trigger an explosion when the effective Ignite perishes. So it's pretty sweet in that regards. But we'll be stacking this with another ability called Bloodrage from the Blood Magic tree. This is an AoE buff spell that will affect you and 4 allies. It will heal you for a small amount and also increase your movement speed and attack speed even further. And they will stack to each other. And this will further stack once you unlock your Storm magic to get the Veil of Storm dash, which also increases your attack speed. Static also triggers Shock, dealing 10% magic damage, and triggers Chain Lightning. It's really good for AoE packs. Anyhow, you combine all 3 of these and you can have incredible attack speed. While it can be useful in combat, I think it's more useful for farming, chopping down trees or breaking down ores. However, we can further enhance this ability by using the Q of our copper axes, and what it does is it will be a very quick dash, and if you hit something, you'll get a really quick burst of attack speed, which again will stack with all this other stuff. So pretty nice. And as for what blood types to utilize for your Berserker, if you're actually going to be using this build in combat, I highly encourage you to use the Bruiser Blood, as you'll just have a lot of just natural leech on your melee attacks, which could be really useful. Also, if you utilize the item sets and accessories that will also give you melee leech, this will make this build a lot better as well. At least surviving in combat. However, if you're going to be using this build to farm, which most likely you are, you definitely want to get the Worker Blood, as it will just significantly increase your gathering capabilities. So now that you see how effective it is at chopping trees and stones, let's see how it fares against an actual opponent. Here's the boss of the Act 2. As I get hit by literally everything. It's not the best in combat, but it can deal a decent amount of damage if you get the lineup. But as you can see, as I was getting knocked around, we don't really have many defenses in this build. Primarily, I wanted to showcase this one, mostly for farming. So the other thing I wanted to showcase as well is not only does Bloodrage affect yourself, but it will affect up to 4 allies as well. And I'm sure by now, in your time of playing Vrising, you may have come to realize that the unholy powers or the necromancy options are very potent in this game, at least for player versus environment. Anyhow, so we'll be utilizing Bloodrage again, but however, we will be replacing Power Surge with either Corrupting Skull, which will launch a projectile dealing a decent amount of damage, inflicting Condemn. Condemn is a very good debuff that simply increases all damage to enemies by 15%. And then, should they die while under the effect of Condemn, they will summon a skeleton. Now these skeletons don't do a ton of damage on their own, and mostly they're there just for distractions, which is fantastic, especially if you're just by yourself. Eventually you can overwhelm your enemies with it. Furthermore, Corrupted Skull will deal an additional 40% damage on enemies below 30% to help either execute and just, give you a little extra damage so that you can produce those extra skeletons. But not only that, but anytime Corrupted Skull hits a target, they will summon a skeleton just by itself. So this is basically a skeleton on demand. And then if you happen to kill the target you put Condemned on, you get another skeleton. Pretty nice. So you can either use this skill, or you can use Ward of the Damned, which also summons a decent amount of skeletons as well. Whereas the Ward of the Damned is more defensive, as it's a counter attack, which will block melee and projectile attacks in front of you for 2 seconds. Absorbing any attack the first time will summon a skeleton. And then each attack beyond that you absorb has a 50% chance to summon a skeleton, up to 5. And then melee attackers are also knocked back. And then you have a small window while you're casting this, in that 2 seconds, to kind of do a small AoE, but more importantly, inflicting Condemn on all the targets around you. So on boss fights that have multiple strikes, or perhaps you're just surrounded by a ton of enemies, Ward of the Damned will protect you and also bring you lots of undead to help fight with you, and hopefully cause distractions. And should we use Bloodrage on top of that, all of our skeletons will get buffed with the heal and the attack speed and the movement speed. And then beyond that, once you get your tier 2 Unholy Magic, pick up Veil of Bones ASAP. Death Knight is pretty good. Soulburn's okay, but Veil of Bones is really good, as it will always guarantee to summon a skeleton for you, should you land your attack after your first jump. The combination of these, just do these 2 abilities alone right here, will just give you tons of skeletons, and that's not even going into our Army of the Damned ultimate, which just summons a ton of undead and will just melt your opponent. Now we're waiting for the boss respawn, and we're going to show how quickly we melt this target. Alright, so here we go. Oh, that's actually pretty lucky. He got stuck back there. Come on, buddy. But anyways, you can kind of get the idea. Granted, we're severely over-leveled right now, but, you still get the idea. It would still melt them even at the regular level as well. So, and as for what kind of blood to be using for this build doesn't actually really care what blood you're using, so you should be good overall. However, if you did want to really increase your damage, Scholar blood would probably suit you well, as you can get more recast and get more skeletons out. So moving on to another build, which I think is fantastic, what I consider my boss killing build. It's also pretty decent in PvP, but we'll get into that in a moment. Essentially, this build is going to be utilizing the slashers, which are the dagger type abilities, as well as the illusion dash, Veil of Illusion. So Veil of Illusion will just showcase how it works. Then you recast and you come back to where you were. So usually what I like to do is use various range spells. Typically I like using Chaos Volley, mostly because I play this game since early access, and even back then Chaos Volley was really good. They did tone it down between then and now, however it's still a really good spell. So while you're keeping your distance and using your range spells, you can jump in, do a quick little Q, and then jump back, and then run away with your stealth. There's a lot of kinds of trickery you can do. And if you want even more displacement, we'll show that in a moment. So, like I said, it uses Veil of Illusion to dash towards a direction. You get your next attack will heal you for a little bit and also inflicts Weaken. Weaken does exactly what it says. It weakens your enemies by reducing the damage they deal by 50%. And then 30% chance to gain Phantasm whenever a weakened target perishes. And What is Phantasm? Phantasm reduces your spell cooldowns by 1% and grants 2% chance to reset cooldown on cast. This effect can stack up to 10 times, so that's a 10% cooldown reduction and 20% chance to recast your spell. So if you have other ways to produce more Phantasms, the better. Typically though, I usually only run just Veil of Illusion, usually that's enough for me, but you might want to consider running another illusion spell. Yeah, ultimately, like I said, this build is just Veil of Illusions and using the slashers. As for secondary abilities, you can use Chaos Volley for a nice reliable ranged attack that shoots twice, deals ignite damage, and is just really reliable ability to just whittle down your the boss. You could double down and use another ranged bolt like the Corrupted Skull, or you can just use a variety of other spells. I'm actually a big fan of using Ball Lightning, then just whatever ulti you like to use. Just with this build, honestly, I really like using Chaos Barrage. It does a ton of damage if you time it right, and can just really devastate your opponents or the boss. So unlike the last two builds, which were mostly for PvE, this build is actually very useful for PvP. I've used it many times on early access and even like the first day on launch on some public servers. It was a lot of fun. As for another ability that you might consider using, depending on what your situation is, if you're fighting a lot of targets, you can use Spectral Wolf to just make your wolf bounce around between other people. You can use your Ray Spear to do some damage to help also dodge a little bit. But typically I will run this build, and we'll showcase some of it in action. And the obvious blood type to utilize with this build, to go with your chance to cooldown, the chance to reset your cooldown, is the Scholar Blood. As if you have a high enough percentage, it will give you a buff to also give you a chance to reset your spells. Just making it so you can really just blast your opponent's system in the arena. Alright, so these are just a few of the builds I believe to be essential for you to succeed in Vrising, and fear not, I will have more PvP centric builds to come, as well as some other fun and flavorful builds too. Alright, well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like these. And there'll be plenty more Vrising videos to come. And I hope to see you in the next one. Farewell for now.